Hi everyone. My name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Today I have a really exciting video for you and I hope that it serves as two parts, right? Obviously by the title you can see that this is going to be books all by TL Swan, but I also wanted to make it like a contemporary romance rec because her books all of them are like similar but different, which not the most inventive way to explain it that I've ever said before, but TL Swan's an author that I first read last year, and the first book of hers I ever read was called The Italian, which we're going to get to, and there was just a way that she wrote her characters, and she took a lot of time with them. Most of her books are all very big, even from the like standalone ones, they're pretty big. Whereas her series, I mean, it's a long one, but even in that, each book is pretty long. So the biggest criticism some people might say of her is that she drags on too long and that her characters fight a lot. And both of those things are true. She's very angsty with 90% of her books are very angsty. But I like that, so I have a fun time with it. But what I'm planning to do today is go through her books from like, I'm going to go through her like main series that she's known for and then where the books fit into it. And then I'll go over her other like small series and then the standalones that she currently has and just kind of talk about in each book like why I think it's a good rec for you. Or, you know, if you want to just try her, I think the standalones are a good place to start and just kind of explain like why she is an auto-buy author for me and why she's someone that I actually want to own all of hers. So I actually own 5 of them myself. I want to get the rest of one of the series and some of the standalones, but I just love her. So we'll see how this video goes. If you probably didn't click on this if you're not super interested in just hearing about one author, but I really just wanted to just share like why she is such a favorite of mine, and she's one of the few authors that I have read everything that they've written. Well, okay, right away there's a caveat. There's one I haven't read because it's been like I've been saving it. So I lied. There's one I haven't read of hers. But I've read everything else that she's written, and the lowest I've given one of them is like a 4-star. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to go through her Stanton series, which is like her earliest series that I could tell, because I did, go through all the years and everything. And then that series like bled into a few like standalones that could be read as standalones but feel more satisfying when they fit into the Stanton universe because they're about brothers or bodyguards or things like that within the series. So let's go ahead and get started with that and we'll see how this goes, right? So the first book in the Stanton series is Stanton Adore. I love the covers of these ones. And then I also own Stanton Unconditional is book 2. And then there is Stanton Completely and Stanton Bliss. So those Bliss is basically like kind of the epilogue. I honestly look at this series as like TL Swan's like After, but not. It's a completely different layout of the story. But I had read After before, and there were just certain parts of how the story was laid out that reminded me of After. Even though like the characters are completely different from them. But Stanton Adore is about Josh and Natasha, and we start the series off with getting a flashback of when she is 17 and he's 19, I believe, and they have been kind of having the hots for each other for a while. And the big thing that is an obstacle between them is that they are first cousins, as far as we know. Spoiler alert, because I don't want you to be annoyed if incest is an issue for you. So you can skip that. I mean, it's kind of, they're not actually. related, and we find that out. But there are some people who have a vested interest in them not knowing that they're not related, even at the cost of their relationship, and the guilt that they feel, and how like they struggle with loving their cousin because there's someone, a relative, who doesn't want them to know that they're not related because it would ruin their life if that were to get out, more than it's, you know, ruining their lives to be in love with their cousin. But anyway, so they have this night together when they're 17 and 19. And then it gets found out that they have feelings for each other. And so one of them gets sent away. And this time is used to kind of keep them away from each other and to try to get them to, you know, not be in love with each other anymore. But it is, I don't know how many years later it is. 7 years later, they see each other again, and all of that feeling is still there. And they both have been miserable all this time. Josh has been a playboy. The family business is doing really well. He's pretty wealthy, and he's been doing the route of just trying to fill the void in any way that he can. And Tasha has just been kind of living a half-life. So then the rest of the books in this series are them first, you know, kind of keeping things a secret, and then how their family feels about it, and then other things like that. So I really, really loved this. This definitely has toxic relationship that has nothing to do with them being related to each other, because the communication's not great sometimes, and that might be very frustrating. I know miscommunication's a big thing for me, but the kind of relationship that these two have, and the way that they need to keep certain things a secret, and the way that their families have like tried to keep them apart, it's understandable that miscommunications would happen because they can't always be honest about their feelings like in front of other people. So it gets them into some interesting situations. But Josh is pretty possessive, and Natasha, at some points, like, he's a right to be possessive just because of the high profile life that he leads, and whether she was a relative or his lover, he needs to protect her from that, and she's very resistant to it sometimes. And that's a character trait that gets, I'm all for the woman's independence, but also I would never be foolish with it. So that could get a little bit frustrating. But I will say that Stanton series, I love it. And it's even like the least of these that I love, but I still love it. So Stanton series, I'm working on getting the other two, but I have the first two in this and I love it. So then within the Stanton universe, she has this set up on her website where you can see it. She actually wrote these 4 other books that currently all fit into it. There is supposed to be another one that will come out soon. Don't know when it's coming out, but it is supposed to. But then next, which takes place 5 years later, is Mark's Girl. So this is about Ben and Bridget. And during the Stanton series, Ben was the head of security for Josh. So we spend a lot of time with Ben. Whenever we're like in Josh's POV, Ben is there. And Bridget, I believe, is, I don't know if I can't remember. I wish I would have wrote down how she's related to them. I can't remember if she's Josh's sister or Natasha's sister, but she's one of their sisters. And there was a serious flirtation happening with these two, and Ben felt like he had a really bad past and didn't want anything more to happen, so he actually leaves his job and goes and works in a different job. I can't remember if he gets called back into the military or what it is, but he's gone for 5 years. So that happened like at the end of the Stanton series, and Bridget and Ben had kind of had a fling, and then he was just like, I'm no good for you, and so he found a different job and left. And now it's 5 years later, and he's coming back into their lives. So that's a fun part of this too, is like you're gonna get to see the characters you already love at different points in their lives and see children and stuff like that. And I really, really like it. So it's awesome. I love it. Then we have Gym Junkie, which is 7 years later. So it's not 7 years later from the 5 years later. It's 7 years later from the end of Stanton Bliss. So it's 2 years more after Mark's girl. So Gym Junkie is about Brock and Tully. And so I believe Brock works with Ben, and Tully is just this woman who's going to the gym. And so she's at the gym working out later at night, and Brock is the only other person there, and they end up, you know, he's wearing low slung gray sweatpants, you know how that looks on a guy, and they end up fucking in the bathroom, and it's really dirty and really hot. Oh wait, that's something I should mention. The sex and the dirty talk that TL Swan can produce is amazing. It's amazing. But they have super dirty, sexy sex, and Tully is a bit overwhelmed by it. She is saying yes all the way through. She's happy to be having this fling with him, but it's a little intense for her. And so she has it, and she thinks it's going to be a one-time thing, not knowing that she's now kind of ignited this thing in Brock, and now he is ready to kind of pursue her because they had really hot sex at the gym. So there's that one. And then we have the Stanton, we have Dr. Stanton, and then the Dr. Stanton, the epilogue. So it's really kind of like a duology because the epilogue's pretty long. But this one takes place 10 years later. So the thing about how these were written too is that TL Swan actually wrote the Stanton series, and then she wrote the 10 years later one because she wanted to write about Cameron so much. And then she went back and wrote the other two to fill it in. So when you read Gym Junkie, there's a situation that happens to Cam that we're getting to see him dealing with. It may even be in Mark's Girl that we see it happen too. And that is that Cam, he is in Vegas because I think the Stantons own some, like they own, everyone owns a hotel in Vegas apparently when you read these like billionaire books and stuff. And there's this girl who's getting like hit on by this weird guy, and so she her name is Ashley, and she like leans over and like pretends that Cam is her husband. So they pretend to be husband and wife when they're at the bar, and then they go back to her hotel and have a super sexy, just awesome time. And then they give each other their phone numbers and they go their separate ways, and Cam's phone gets stolen. So he loses her number, and then when she tries to call him, doesn't have his number, and I think she'd also given him like a fake name or just first name that I can't remember what it was, but this is a case of secret baby, and it's that case of I can't remember the full reasoning of it, of like if she ends up finding who he is or not or what, but anyway, she is going to medical school and Cam is a doctor, and it's one of those where like they end up at the same place, which TL Swan likes to do this trope a lot, and I like it too. I'm into it. It's fun. But in this case, it being a secret baby, she keeps this a secret for a while. And so Dr. Stanton, I've never had such mood swings for a hero that like I already loved so much. And I think part of it is that I read it the order that she wrote it in. So I read I actually think I read Dr. Stanton. Yeah, I read it really early on. I don't even know if I had read the Stanton series yet. Wow, that memory is coming to me because I didn't know who Cam was the first time I read this book. But either way, he's so sweet and endearing in the beginning, and then you see these different snippets of him like trying to find her because his family has a lot of money and he's wealthy, and he spends this next however many years always hoping that he'll run into this woman. Like I think he goes back to the same club like a couple times a year or like the same time every year, hoping to find her. She's just kind of this elusive woman that they connected so well, and it's just a like tragedy. And then it gets worse because she is kind of having some hard times in her life trying to make her way through school, and she's actually working at a club when he finds her again. And when he finds out that they have a son together, and things don't go so well between them right away once he finds out about his son, she's actually in threat of losing her son to Cam. And Cam isn't the nicest about it. And so it's uncomfortable. It's hard to read. But when you look at the things from his point of view, you just want him to be more understanding, because we know that this woman, that Ashley, had all the best intentions, and she's a single mom trying to do her best and pay her way through medical school, and Cam has all the money in the world and wants to help, and when she spurns that, he gets a little bit nasty. So know that this book is hard. I still gave these books 5 stars because the turnaround and the grovel in this is amazing. And this family, you'll see if you start this, like, the men are alpha holes. This is an alpha hole situation. She writes a lot of alpha holes. She writes a couple cinnamon rolls, and we're getting to her cinnamon buns that we got, but she writes some alpha holes. So as I'm talking through these books, like, if you don't enjoy a guy who's kind of a dick, or sometimes a major dick, then you might get frustrated with her, which is what a lot of people do. So that is the complete Stanton series. It goes from Stanton Adore, and then to Mark's Girl, and then the Gym Junkies, and then Dr. Stanton. And you get to see like 12 years of life for this family and friends. And I love it. And I believe, again, I think she's still writing another one. I didn't write down the name of her books to come, but that's kind of the hard part I find with some self-published authors who don't update their socials a lot, which I get. They want to keep things private about, you know, and it leaves her room to write a random book that none of us have heard about at all. It gets frustrating for people who like the schedule of published authors, who even if their books are set years out, you can count on when they're coming out. And like, I've been waiting for one of the sequels we're going to talk about for 2.5 years, and it keeps just saying that she will write it. Like, I think I even read it in like the back of one of her books. She like has it listed that it's coming, but there's been no updates or anything like that. So let's move on to her 2 other like series that she has currently, and both of these only have 2 books in them right now. First, there is the Miles High Club, which if you are a viewer of my channel, you know that the Miles High Club, specifically the second book in the series, is my favorite book by her, and it's one of my favorite books of this year. The hero from that book is on my book boyfriends list for eternity now. But the first one in that series, the Miles High Club, is about 3 brothers, the Miles brothers, and they own property in 3 different countries, and they rotate 3 times a year, so that no one brother has to be stuck in one certain country. And we have the oldest brother, which, again, I didn't write down his name. It's James. It's James. He has the book called The Stopover. And The Stopover is another one-night stand book where they don't get each other's information. So there is a storm, and their plane has to touch down in another state instead of where they were supposed to go. And so this couple who'd like hit it off on the plane, they end up sharing their hotel room where the airline puts them up, and then they don't get each other's information purposefully, because they're like, this is going to be sexier if we remember as a one-night stand. He's like, I'm really busy with my job and business. I don't want to let you down. And she's like, yeah, I'm trying to get a new job and actually move to a different city, so this wouldn't be good. So they mutually agree not to have each other's numbers, but then immediately regret it. So then, a year later, this woman finally is able to set up the job interview that got canceled. It takes a whole year for her to get in again. And it turns out that the place she was taking an interview at is his publishing company. And I think it's a news publishing company. Like, they're a news, yeah. So it's not like books, it's news and stuff. And she gets a job there. And he knows who she is as soon as she walks in. This is my one-night stand. I've been wishing I could see her again. And they enter into, now it's an office romance, as well as a, like, second chance. or a first real chance, because their first chance was they didn't, they just had a one-night stand. But it was really good. This was one where the hero really disappointed me because he jumps to a conclusion. It's based on his past experiences, but it's one of those where I don't appreciate it. So I'd actually read this book a long time ago and didn't know it when I made my way through all of her catalog. And then when The Takeover came out, I went back and read it, and it said on Goodreads I had already read it, and I started to remember it as I read it. But in the stopover, we do get to meet Tristan, who is I think he's the oldest or the second, I don't know, but he is very helpful to the couple in the stopover. Like, he kind of talks to his brother and is like, you are being an ass about some stuff. And it's par for the course because Tristan is my dreamboat. He's my dreamboat. So then we get to The Takeover, and we have Tristan and Claire. And so Tristan, now at this point, he's 33, and his part of the company is he's in acquisitions, so they will acquire new business and keep the parts they want, get rid of what they don't. And one of the businesses he wants to take over is Claire's publishing company, her marketing. This one is marketing. And her husband has died 5 years ago. She's 38. She has 3 sons, and they are older. None of them are babies. She has a 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 9-year-old, I think is what their ages are. They're fantastic. The kids in this book are my favorite kids I've probably read in a book in just for a long time. But anyway, so he comes in and he's going to make an offer for the company, and she says, fuck off, I'm not selling my past husband's company. I'm going to keep it running until my sons are old enough to take it over. And Tristan, number one, thinks she's fiery as hell. And so he's like, okay, sorry, I think you're really cute. Let's go out. Let's talk through this. Yes, I jumped too. He thinks you're cute. And again, she says, screw you. I'm going to make this work. All right. Cue 6 months later. I always get this wrong, but I think it's 6 months later. She's at a business conference in Paris. I'm going to put this down because my arm's getting tired. And he is one of the people speaking at this conference. And so he's like, I've been wanting another chance with you. Tristan is so endearing. You can tell by the smile on my face. I have had, even my friends who, some people had a problem with how the story plays out in this book. Every friend I've asked has loved Tristan. No one has been, Tristan's a dud when I've got you to read it. So if you want a swoony hero that is just going to liquefy your insides like a chocolate lava cake, that's Tristan. All right, he just, But anyway, so they end up having a one-night stand there, and then he invites her to extend her trip and come to, he needs to go to another conference, and he asks her to stay on in France and go to this with him. And so she talks to her mom, who's staying with the kids, and is like, hey, can I have another 3 days? And the mom's like, yes, you're having fun in Europe. You need it, because you haven't been with anyone since your husband has died. And this is a case of this is a contemporary, and she loved her husband. I think a lot of times when a spouse is gone, they can be a horrible person, and so we're glad that they're gone or something like that. But Wayne, her dead husband, he was a fabulous husband and father, and they still had a great sex life. They still had, everything was great. She thought he was her soulmate, and so that makes her very resistant to Tristan, even when he proves again and again that he is meant to be. And so, but anyway, so they have this. He knows that she has kids. He knows this. But when they get back home, he goes to try to take her out for lunch, and she's like, Tristan, what happens in Paris has to stay in Paris. Thank you so much for, making me feel sexy and wanted, but I have 3 hearts attached to mine. Oh gosh, it makes me want to cry. I knew I'd cry talking about TL Swan. This book is so beautiful. It makes me think of, there's a country song that's called More Hearts Than Mine, where it's if you break up, you're not just breaking up with me. But anyway, she has 3 sons, and he's like, yeah, whatever, I can win over these kids. So he goes over to her house to surprise her, and her sons take the stuffing out of him. not only did her oldest son accidentally find Tristan's boxers mixed in with his mom's clothes, because he's like, they're looking through her suitcase to find presents she brought back, and Tristan's boxers, she'd like worn them back to her apartment or back to her hotel room. And so she had his boxers, and they had just found this and are like, Mom, did you not go on a work vacation? Did you go on a slutty weekend? And then Tristan shows up. So her oldest son actually like pushes him, and he falls down the stairs onto a skateboard and like hurts his leg. So he kind of like runs away like the Roadrunner, because it just all like hits him all at once of her like bamboozling him. Well, not her, but like her kids. And so he freaks out and is like, oh my God, I can't do this. And then her son, the oldest son who pushed him down, is actually the one who he ends up trying to get an internship with Tristan. And so Tristan decides to take him under his wing. And not only does that put Claire like back in proximity to him, but Tristan actually really becomes a good mentor to him. And so then we enter the phase of this book where Tristan says, game on. I am going to win over your sons. If you say I need those 3 hearts to get to yours, I will get them. And so he goes about it. And there's lots of hijinks. The middle son, his name is Harry, so like Tristan always calls him the wizard or like makes Harry Potter jokes about him all the time, and it's super cute. Some of the things the kids do get a little ridiculous and dangerous, so that's something to know, but it is a story, and it's beautiful to watch him woo them. And when her insecurities rise up and when things get a little too intense, it gets heartbreaking to see. It's hard. However, it's really beautiful, and I loved this family, and I loved watching Tristan just scoop them up in his arms and fall in love with these boys and claim them. And it's gorgeous. This book is fantastic, and Claire is so frustrating sometimes, but I look at the grief and like there isn't a timeline of grief. Like, I don't know, something about this just really hit me. My uncle, he just recently got remarried, and my aunt died 6 years ago. 6 years ago, she died of a brain tumor, and he doesn't have young kids. They're, older than me, but I remember the pain that he was in, and like grief comes and goes. But when you find a person, that second chance romance, who is respectful of that previous love, but also is like, we don't have to push that person out of your life for us to have a life. And I love that. And that person wants you to be happy. There's a line in this book where her oldest son is kind of chastising her and is like, Mom, like, why? Like, Tristan, he's amazing. And she's like, I didn't want to replace your father. And her oldest son says, well, Mom, don't you think our dad sent him to you to give you someone to love like him? And I cried the whole way through this damn book, but that just pushed me over the edge. So anyway, enough of that. Then I won't talk about these ones too much because I don't remember as much about them, but she has another standalone series called the Mr. series. And so there's Mr. Masters and Mr. Spencer. Mr. Masters is a nanny story. This girl thinks that she's going to be a nanny for this mom and her kids, and it's really a dad and his kids. It's super cute. Then there's Mr. Spencer, which I think is another workplace romance. Really fun. Those ones are both 4 stars. They're not the same standout as some of these others I've said. So then we have her standalones. So she currently has 4 that like are currently standalones. One of them, like I said, she has listed the sequel, but I have not heard any updates on it. I hope it's one she's working on soon, because the book isn't a cliffhanger, but the setup for what the next one's going to be about is kind of like a cliffhanger, because I can't wait to read it. But she has 4 standalones, and so the first one is the one I haven't read yet, and that's Find Me, Alistair. So I think this one's male. I could be lying about that, but I'm saving that one. So That's one I haven't read. I do that sometimes. Do you ever do that? I have a favorite author and I love everything they've written, and then you find a book by theirs and you just like save it. Because that happened with Play Along. So Play Along is a standalone captive romance. It also has like cartel ties in it. It's also a secret identity one too. So Play Along is about this girl that she catches her boyfriend cheating on her, and then she ends up seeing a like drug or gun buy happen, and so she gets kidnapped by the men doing it and brought onto a container ship. And so this container ship, they have like the drug cartel will like fly in and out on helicopter and like pick up their supplies, and so they'll be on this for a while, and they make different stops along the way. And so one of the men who, he's actually, I think, chose to kidnap her because otherwise they were just going to shoot her. He is actually kind of undercover, not for like the police or anything, but he's undercover himself to get revenge against this cartel for taking his family away. I think his brother. And so there's women on this ship who are prostitutes who chose to travel with the ship because they make money traveling with them. There's also a woman on the ship that she's in a menage relationship with two of the men on the ship, and so she shares a room with them. But there are some people that, yeah, there's some women on there who they choose to travel with them because they'll travel with them for like a month on and then make a bunch of money and then come back 6 months later and do it again. But she is in danger of being a slave there instead of a prostitute who's making money. But the man who captured her, he offers to let her stay in his room. He won't like touch her in the beginning, but she has to stay in his room. So it was very interesting. And the places that it goes, it was really sexy. And the place the story started completely ends a different place. Like I said, she's hiding a secret. She knows more about this cartel than she seems, even though it's still an accident that she ends up on this container ship. She is more connected with them than she thinks. So this was a really, really great book. It was one of the two that I was saving, and now I only have one left. And I'm like, write more books, please. So then we have the first one I ever read, which is The Italian by TL Swan. And this is, yeah, this is amazing. This is about Enrico and Olivia, I think. Yeah, Olivia and Enrico. And this starts out as a fling as well. She does that with everything. She and a friend are traveling and they stop in Italy, and she meets this police officer, Enrico. And yes, it starts very interesting. And they have an amazing like weekend together. And then she's going to finish her trip, and he convinces her that she's going to come back to this city after she finishes her trip with her friend. And so she's actually from Australia. A lot of her books take place in Australia because TL Swan is Australian. And so she does that, but when she comes back to the city, she had drugs planted in her suitcase because she didn't lock her suitcase. And while she's been gone, Enrico's father and grandfather have been murdered, and he finds out that they are the head of a mafia. And like, this was kind of kept from him, how serious it is. And he's the oldest, and so he has to take over. So he goes from being a police officer to the capo of the mafia. And as an Italian, he is supposed to marry an Italian and keep things, you know, in the family, so to speak. But he wants Olivia. And so I believe it's 2 or 3 years later, he works things out that she gets a job in his city, and he goes after her again. But this time, he has a lot more secrets to reveal. So this book is fabulous. This is the one that she says she has a sequel coming for, but she like hasn't told us when it's coming. But it's going to be called Ferrera, and it's about Enrico's brother. So this one totally does work as a standalone because Enrico and Olivia's story has a, you know, complete arc. But what's the last name of this? Is it Ferrera? Yeah. the Ferreira family still has a lot of stuff going on for them. So definitely suggest this if you love Mafia, if you want a standalone. This was one of my first Mafia books ever. So I also think it's a good intro to Mafia because there's a lot of, since Olivia is an outsider, there's a lot of explanations about things for her. So that could be helpful. All right. So then her last standalone and the most recent one she put out, which is fantastic, and I love this book, is Our Way. This book is so good. I love it so much. This is about Nathan and what's her name? Eliza. And they become best friends when he's a doctor and she's a nurse at this hospital. It's both of their first days. They meet in the cafeteria and they hit it off, and she thinks he's super cute. So she asks him out, and he's like, sorry, babe, I'm gay. And she's like, well, I'll still ask you out. I'd love to have a hot gay friend. She's making a joke of it because she, you know, and he's like, yeah, I'll be your friend. And so they become friends, and they're best friends for 10 years through each other's relationships that they have. And she's always had this crush on him, hasn't got over her initial attraction to him. And then Nathan starts to be attracted to her and starts to realize that maybe it's not as black and white as he thought it was. And maybe he's not just straight gay, if that makes sense. Maybe there is more nuance to that. Maybe our sexuality isn't so cut and dried. And it's amazing. This also, though, has some toxic relationship stuff in it because whether Nathan is gay or straight, he's a very possessive lover. And there's a lot of things about Eliza that are innocent in some ways. And he's there to kind of help her try some new things. But there isn't quite enough groveling in this one. As like, I gave this just 5 out of 5 stars, 6 stars when I first read it. But upon like some like pondering, even though I love alpha holes and I love that toxic shit sometimes, I wish there had been just a little more grovel to this. Whereas like, I feel like TL Swan does a grovel like really good. But like Nathan is just, he's amazing. This book just blew my mind. I've always kind of wanted to read a book like this where it was kind of like the reverse sexuality change. You know, I've read a lot of books where it's like gay for the first time or gay for you or let's try something new. And like Nathan is just so sure that he's only into men because that's all that he's ever tried. But it becomes much more nuanced than that because he falls in love with people and not their genitalia, and he's just fine with whatever you got going on down there. But he doesn't even know that about himself, which I think is really cool. And I'd always wanted to read one like that where someone thinks that they're gay, only gay, and then starts having feelings the other way. Like, I just think that's fascinating because I think we've read a lot of them where it's the other way. And this one, it's a friends to lovers, a slow burn, super sexy. Like, there's bed sharing, and these as friends, they go on a vacation together every year. So like this year they decide to use their vacation as like, let's test out the sexual waters and all that stuff. And it's great. So yeah, so that's it. Those are all of the TL Swan books. I hope that you will give her a try. I hope one of these books sounds like it'd be up your alley and you'd be willing to give her a shot. A lot of the books are on Kindle Unlimited. I think all of them are. I'm trying to think if I had to buy any of them. I think all of them are on Kindle Unlimited. But they're so beautiful and so good. And I just think that she does angsty and like intense men. Again, if you love alpha holes, that's where to go. If you want a cinnamon bun, try out my baby Tristan. Just give it a go. So thank you so much for watching this. Thanks for putting up with my gush. And I hope that you will give this a try. I plan to do some more deep dive on some authors, especially authors from my auto buy list, to talk about like why they're an auto buy for me. So yeah, I hope you will come along for the ride. So thank you so much for watching this. I put up new videos almost daily, so make sure to subscribe to my channel. Check out my links down below to find out what I'm reading and to find me on social, and you have a wonderful day. Bye.